Hi, the name of this Blender video tutorial is StaticParticles. So far, we have been working with Blender emitter particle systems and their manipulation over the timeline animation period. Blender also contains a static particle system called Hair. To demonstrate Blender's static particle system, I've placed in my scene a simple UV sphere object. The scene is lighted by a warm sun lamp from one side and a cool Hemi lamp from the other side. The scene also has two cameras, A for wide-angle shot and B for a close-up. I will select the UV sphere object and go to the Particles editor and click on the plus sign and create a new particle system. Under Type, I'll select Hair. As you can see, Blender displays a number of static particles, displayed as lines, emanating from the UV sphere object faces. The total number of static particles is determined by the emission number value, which by default is set to 1000. I will lower the number to 250. The length of the static particles is determined by the length controller, which by default is set to 4 Blender units. I will lower this number to 1. The static particles are, at least initially, projected from the object in the direction of the object's face normal. I will tab into Edit Mode, and with all the vertices selected, I'll click on the Flip Direction on the Normals panel in the Tool panel on the left. This will flip the object's face normals so that they're all pointing inward. I'll tab out of Edit Mode and go to Wireframe View. The static particles are now pointing inward along the object's flipped face normals. I'll tab into Edit Mode and reverse this process. Blender distributes the total number of static particles across the object's faces. A primitive UV sphere object has 512 faces. With a total value of 250, only about half the sphere's faces have static particles. In practice, it is quite common to assign static particles to a selected group of faces. This is done by creating vertex groups that can then be assigned a static particle system. I'll go to Front View and tab into Edit Mode and go to Wireframe, and I'll box select the upper half of the sphere object. I'll then go to the Object Data Editor, and under the Vertex Groups panel, click the plus sign and create a new vertex group. I will name this group Upper Half. I'll then click on the Assign button, which assigns the selected vertices to that group. I will click the Deselect button to deselect the vertices. I'll click the plus sign again and create another vertex group called Top. I will box select the very top set of vertices on the sphere object and assign them to the top vertex group. I'll then click the Deselect button. I now have two vertex groups, Upper Half and Top. I will tab out of Edit Mode and go back to the Particles Editor. In the Vertex Groups panel, under Density, I'll select the Upper Half vertex group. The static particles are now assigned for just that vertex group. I'll increase the number to 2000 and make the hair length 0.3. I'll render the scene. The static particles are rendered as straight white lines emanating up along the vertex group's face normals. In this next section, we'll look at adding color to the static particles. Back in the Particles Editor, in the Vertex Groups panel, I will select the top vertex group. Now, so that I can demonstrate things more clearly, I'll set the number of particles to 25. I'll then select the close-up camera B and press Control Numpad 0, which will make camera B the active camera. I'll then render the scene. Here is a close-up of the 25 static particles. There are a number of options for adding color and texture to the static particles. I'll select the sphere and go to the Materials editor and add a new material. I'll name this material Hole. I'll click in the Diffuse Color swatch and select a lightish yellow color. I'll then render the scene. Note that in addition to the sphere being assigned the yellowish material, the static particles are assigned the same material as well. This is true for any material settings that are located in the first material channel. I'll go back to the Materials editor and click the plus button to create a new material channel. I'll name this material channel Blue. I'll click the Diffuse Color swatch and make a blue color. I'll then go back to the Particles editor, and in the Render panel, the default is set to Material 1. This refers to the top or the first material channel. I will change this to Material number 2, or the second material channel, which currently has a blue color. I'll then render the scene. The static particles now have taken on the color from the second material channel and are rendered blue. I'll go back to the Material editor, create a third material channel, and I'll name it Black. And I'll create a black diffuse color. Back in the Particles editor, in the Render panel, I'll select Material number 3, or Channel number 3, and then render the scene. The particles are now rendered in the black diffuse color of Material Channel number 3. Another approach to adding material to the static particles is to use the Strand Renderer. To do this, I will first, in the Particles editor, Render panel, checkmark Strand Render. I'll then go to the Materials editor and create a new material channel, channel number 4. I will name this channel Strand Color. I'll then go to the Texture editor and add a texture to this material channel. I'll name this texture Ramp Colors. For the texture type, I'll select Blend. In the Colors panel, I'll checkmark Ramp, which opens up the color ramp controls. I'll select the left color marker at position 0 and click on the color swatch. I will set the alpha transparency to full and set the color to a darkish brown. Red to 0.05, green to 0.02, and blue to 0. I'll add a new marker and position it at 0.9. I will give it the same transparency and color as the first color marker. Transparency to full, red to 0.05, green to 0.02, and blue to 0. I'll select the far right marker at position number 1, and I'll leave the white color, but I'll set the alpha transparency to full. In the Blend panel, I will leave the blending as linear and horizontal. In the Mapping panel, I'll set the mapping coordinates to strand/particles. When using the color ramp with strand rendering, the left color is at the base of the static particle and the right color is at the tip of the particle. In the Preview panel, I'll select the Material button and display it as hair strands, which will give me some idea of the effect. I'll then go back to the Material editor and in the Render panel, select Material number 4, or Material Channel 4, and I'll render the scene. The static materials now have a brown color, but also have a white tip. I'll set the number of particles to 2,000, and I'll render the scene. I'll set the number back down to 25, and render the scene. The strand renderer not only allows adjustment of the static particle color, but it also allows adjustment of the static particle dimensions. I'll go back to the materials editor. With the strand color channel selected, I'll go down to the strand panel. Here I can make adjustments to the root and tip dimensions of the strand. The default is 1 pixel for both. I'll set the root to 8 and leave the tip at 1. I'll then render the scene. The roots of the strand are now rendered much wider than the tips. I'll set the roots back down to 4, and I'll go back to the particle editor. I'll set the number to 3000 and the length to 1. I'll go to my camera view and I'll fly out a little bit to get a better camera view of the top of the sphere. I'll then render the scene. Static particles can be controlled in a number of different ways. With the sphere object selected, I'll click on the Mode selection box and switch from Object Mode to Particle Mode. Particle Mode allows many different adjustments to be made to the static particles. I'll select the Point Select mode by clicking on the Point Select button, now located in the 3D Viewport lower menu. Notice that now each of the static particles consists of 5 segments and 6 control points. These correspond to the default 5 segment settings in the Particles panel. I can select any of these control points and press the G key and move them about. I'll render the scene and then undo. I will select the Tip Select mode by clicking on the Tip Select button, now located in the 3D Viewport lower menu. I'll box select some of the tips, press the G key, and move them. I'll then render the scene, and then undo. I will turn off the Tip Select mode by clicking on the Particle Select button in the menu. There are a number of additional static particle controls located in the Tools panel on the left. I'll select the Comb tool. This creates a circular paintbrush tool whose radius and strength are controlled by the radius and strength controllers in the Tool panel. To comb the hair, just click and drag over the hair and the static particles respond. I'll render the scene. The Smooth tool tends to smooth out uneven strands. And the Add tool adds new static particles, even to an area not designated by a vertex group. The Length tool lengthens the particles. And the Cut tool cuts the static particles. The Puff tool puffs the particles back to their original state. There is one last feature of the static particles I'd like to demonstrate. I'll delete this particle system by pressing the minus button in the particle editor. I'll add a new particle system by clicking on the plus sign. And for type, I'll select hair. I'll set the number to 100 and the length to 1. In the Vertex Groups panel, I'll select the top vertex group under Density. I'll then render the scene. Like emitter particles, static particles can have children particles assigned to them. I'll open up the Children panel, and I'll select Simple Children. Leaving all the defaults, I'll just render the scene. There are many different settings available in the Children's panel. However, I'd like to point out a set of controls named Kink. These are preset behaviors for the child's static particles. I'll select Curl and render the scene. I'll then select Radial and render the scene. I'll then select Wave and render the scene. I'll then select Braid and render the scene. Each of these kink behaviors have a set of amplitude, frequency, clump, and shape controls to alter the basic child static particle behavior. This demonstration just begins to scratch the surface of the multitude of options available when working with static particles. You may want to spend some time testing out these various features and explore some of the many undocumented effects.